topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello and welcome. I'm Bill Martinez, and we are live. We're going to talk election fraud. It will not go away. Like any lie that hangs out there. I mean, you know it with your kids. When your kids lie to you, you can't sleep at night. It's there until you finally have that moment where they fess up. Unfortunately, our government has been used to deflecting and continuing to lie. As Dinesh D'Souza told me a couple of years back after his experience in jail, he said the one thing about the cons, his big takeaway was they always hold to the con. They stick to the con no matter what. And this is what our government is doing. So that tells you that they are acting like convicts because they're doing what convicts do. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they destroy, they even kill. It is that diabolical. But, you know, what you're going to find out is the election process and the voter fraud that took place is a mere manifestation. I think it's the tip of the iceberg of the corruption and the level of problem that we have in our government today. Just even on the election issue, you've got almost 2/3 of the country still saying something is fishy. They just do not believe the results of the 2020 election. And meanwhile, you'll have, talking heads, people that maybe you've heretofore respected say, well, there's no proof. Well, but there's a lot of smoke here and there's a lot of things to consider. But because you don't have the courage or the intestinal fortitude to pursue the truth, that doesn't mean that the truth doesn't exist. The fact of the matter that people have so many questions and there's still no answers. And then we find out whenever the truth is pursued by the bureaucracy, they skirt around the truth and they want you to believe something else. It's kind of like listening to a Senate or a congressional hearing. When you hear these people who are being investigated or they got to, be held to account by our elected officials, how they skirt the issues. This is the pattern that we deal with today. Well, so much has been happening in our government. Joe Fried is back with us. Joe is the certified public accountant who wrote the book Debunked. He also has a new book called How Elections Are Stolen. Here's 23 Ways. And these are things that the people who steal and the people in our government, there have been research, there have been studies on this. So some of this isn't like it's new news. It's been there. This is how they do things. But Joe, because of his tenacity and his intestinal fortitude, is bringing forth the truth. But we have other things to talk about, and we want to open up with that. First of all, Joe Fried, welcome back. Good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, as I was mentioning, so much, I mean, we talk about voter fraud, but there's so many other things going on. And I think also Donald Trump's case is part of that iceberg that's hanging out there. And it demonstrates how diabolical our bureaucracy and our government has become. For example, you've got this SCOTUS case that, finally, the Supreme Court has decided to take up the issue of president immunity, right?
That's right. And if you think about it, I think Trump's got a strong case. Mm-hmm. They're not going to, the Supreme Court, there's no way they're going to say a president can do anything he wants, because what if he murdered somebody one night or he was passing out drugs one night? I don't think that's going to happen. But what if he did that? You can't make that rule. But on the other hand, I think they're going to, I'm just guessing, I'm not a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that they might come down with this dual purpose ruling. They're saying, look, when he was talking at the ellipse, on the one hand, yes, he was campaigning, but on the other hand, he was also president talking about problems in our election.
Exactly.
And, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, all sorts of candidates and politicians say important things, but they also are looking in the back at how it affects them politically. It's always a mixed bag. So I can't see if the Supreme Court, they're either going to do that or they're going to say, we have to wait a while until the trial court does something and then we'll rule. I think they're either going to delay or they're going to rule in Trump's favor. That's just a layman's guess.
Well, hopefully they do rule, because in a sense, what would they ignite? The Democrats have already ignited a nuclear bomb here, because this means, just like impeachment, which now we've entered into an approved impeachment inquiry of the Bidens. This is all begat as a result of 2 impeachments of Donald Trump. Once you open up that door, it's hard to put everything back in the closet, as Fibber McGee found out, right?
Yeah. And as I was saying to you earlier, Bill, I'm more excited almost by that other case that just sort of surprised a lot of people. The Supreme Court picked up a case, and I know you're completely aware of it,
right?
Of these guys who have been charged with obstructing an official proceeding.
These are the J6. These are the J6 patriots that are still in jail. Some have been held. In this case, Jake Lang is one of the principals. He's been in jail for over 300 days, Joe.
Crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And here's what they're charging him with. This Jack Smith, the prosecutor, is so outrageous. He took something that was created for the Enron scandal. Just to remind your audience, Arthur Andersen, a giant accounting firm, knew that there were problems, and before they were subpoenaed, they say, well, we better, our normal policy is, I think it was 5 years. We keep documents for 5 years and we shred them.
Right.
And we haven't been doing that. So they instructed their workers, start adhering to our shredding policy. Okay. They paid a price for that, because that was considered to be in contemplation of a subpoena. Now, by the way, just to contrast that, Hillary Clinton.
That's what I'm going to say. I'm just saying, yeah, by contrast, exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
She did it 4 days after a subpoena. So there was no contemplation there. And she got away with murder. She didn't go to jail or anything.
Right. Exactly.
But anyway, what Jack Smith did is he stretched that to say it's not just shredding documents anymore. It's anything you do that can hinder an official proceeding. Well, I'm trying to think, how many times have we all seen Code Pink, those women who wear pink, and they park their butts on the ground in the middle of an assembly room, so that nobody can transact business until they're heard. Are they serving 20-year sentences? That's what, by the way, that's what he's looking for, 20-year sentences. The man's crazy. Right. I have to agree with Trump. He's deranged. It's just insane.
But he's deranged, and he's got compatriots with him. He's got the judicial branch, these these judges that are going along, and they're issuing these decrees. And 22 years in jail, for various patriots for doing what our Constitution allows them to do. And that is to redress their issues with the government. And the government says, oh, no, you can't redress. We're going to throw you in jail.
I think the Supreme Court, the conservatives at least, are going to say, wait a minute now. If you start opening up this can of worms, what's going to happen is every time somebody wants to protest something, they're going to have to worry in the back of their head, well, I want to protest, but I might impede these senators or these congressmen from doing their job. Oh, by the way, Bill, what about that guy who pulled the fire alarm?
Exactly.
Is he being charged? Is he going to prison for 20 years? It's crazy.
Yeah, of course not. Well, you see, this is the deal. I mean, this two-tiered justice system that we're living under right now has got to stop. Yeah. And hopefully SCOTUS can step up and save the country, Joe, because like you say, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What they've done, in terms of president immunity, what they're doing to Donald Trump right now, a leading candidate for president. And, clearly, I mean, you talk about election interference. I mean, the Democrats have not stopped interfering with the election process, going back to this narrative about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Bill, that reminds me, I take issue with one of the things you said in your intro. you said that, it's hard to prove these things. As far as I'm concerned, now, maybe I'm off to an extreme, but when it came out that the FBI consciously suppressed the story of the laptop, to me, it was time for a new election.
Exactly.
Because when your government agencies, powerful agencies, sit on something for 11 months and deliberately wait because they knew damn well what that would do, I think that's enough. We already have the proof.
No, Joe, I would agree with you on that stance. The problem we're having is getting any kind of support from the FBI, because they're all complicit in this, because the cabal ran so deep, because it was not only 51, security officials signing a letter declaring that if this was Russian disinformation. So you got them involved. You also know the FBI, to your point, a year at least prior to, had already checked out the laptop and they knew that it was legitimate. Yeah. And on top of that, they took it further. You talk about conspiracy. Then they go to the heads of these social media entities and say, hey, heads up, there's going to be some Russian disinformation, wink, wink, coming down the line here, and you need to be prepared. And, they could say in a very casual sort of way, Joe, the way these people will do this, or at least the way they'll admit it in court, is we never told them exactly what to do. We didn't tell them. We just said, hey, be prepared. But you've got the government in your office telling you this has happened. There is an implied directive with their presence and them showing up at your offices, I would think.
And Bill, I hope the House Republicans get some of those 51 people up on the stand.
Yes.
Because, they rushed that letter out just in time for Joe Biden's last debate so that he would have something to say, because he knew it was coming. And that way, remember how emphatic he was, and he was indignant that Trump would bring up this charge against his son that was fabricated. It was Russian disinformation. They did that for him. That's why I say, really, you need a new election right at that point. Exactly. Everything else, and there's a lot more, but that was enough to say we need a new election, because they interfered. It wasn't just the media. If it were just the media, I'd say that's not the same. But when you have agencies of the government taking a hand in a material hand, that's big.
Yeah. And the other, kind of get out of jail card for these guys is what they always say is that, well, we looked at it. It wouldn't make a big difference. It's not going to change the results of the election. Right. Yeah. Well, the research said that if the people knew about Hunter Biden's laptop, 15% of the people said they would not have voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So,
it's big.
This is a huge number. So for them to say, oh, it wouldn't make any difference, I think it takes that calculus off the table, doesn't it?
It definitely does. And those 15% Biden supporters, of course, the Republicans would have been even more motivated to run to the polls. So it would have been at least the 15%. Now, all right, maybe some of those people are just talking that way, but you didn't need 15%. If it was 3%, if it was 2%, that would have changed the election. So for sure, I think we really at that point needed a new election, but there were no Republicans in the government that had power to push for that.
Well, I think that they tried to. Unfortunately, the timing, the way January 6th unfolded, the way it was orchestrated. I just saw another interview with Stephen Sun, who was the head of the Capitol Police, right? Yeah. And he's explaining what went on. My good, you talk about interference.
Yeah.
And you talk about a setup. And Sun is there, and he can't quite say that it was a setup, and he's got to be careful about how he frames this. But any reasonable individual would draw from this that Nancy Pelosi was up to her earlobes, that she orchestrated this whole situation. She purposely delayed support and put the Capitol Police in danger.
Yeah. And if I recall, she fired him the very next day. So he didn't get to talk for a couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah, they weren't taking any chances.
Yeah, and I don't know, in terms of firing him, that whole situation, but yet the number two, Anadonda, I can't remember exactly her name right now. We interviewed one of the Capitol Police that was he was in charge of the grounds at the time. TK Johnson, I believe is his name. Great guy, and he tells how many times that he tried to get in touch with with her, and she refused. I mean, would not give him an answer and how he could protect his people. He got pushed out because he knew too much as well. But meanwhile, interestingly enough, she doesn't get fired. They elevated her. I think Nancy Pelosi made her the acting Capitol Police chief after Sun left, and the troops just revolted, said no, we don't want her, and so they ended up moving her out off the Capitol grounds and gave her a promotion to be in charge of the police at Berkeley, for a lot more pay, and just right across the way from Nancy Pelosi's district. So what does that tell you?
Well, one thing it tells me is things are crumbling for the Democrats right now, and they must really regret. They would have had the House and the Senate, but they miscalculated. They didn't have their ballot harvesters in New York. They didn't think they needed to be in New York.
Right.
I think that's where they needed to be. Mm-hmm. And so now, thank God we have, the Republicans have, and I don't know even if you're a Republican, but thank God the Republicans have the House, because that's what's unraveling things. And one more thing on these, on what we were talking about with Sund. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed lately when they put out the video, all that video, they've already caught a couple of those indignant policemen. One is named Dunn, and they're caught in lies. They were saying things that the video shows were impossible because they weren't at the spot they claimed to be at.
Right.
So there's a lot more that's going to keep happening. I think this is going to be a painful year for the Democrats as things start to unravel.
Well, and it should be, if we have any hope of getting control of our government again. This is, so symbolic and emblematic of the severe problem and the disease that exists in our government, that you would have one person like Nancy Pelosi endangering Congress for the sake of democratic posturing and I say democratic, not democratic as a government, but the Democratic Party for posturing and for an advantage over the Republicans. There is no doubt this was fixed. This is what's clearly coming out.
The word that was used was optics. They were told the optics aren't good. We can't have the National Guard because the optics don't look good. And for the sake of optics, those are why people were hurt, if any, to the extent they were hurt. I mean, the only one killed, of course, was a MAGA supporter. So
well, Ashley Babbitt, I mean, here she is, and you've got, and of course, that police officer whose name was withheld for a while, of course, everybody knows now, but for him to fire a round into a group of people, that is so irresponsible. But they elevated him to hero status for killing an unarmed patriot.
It's you shake your head, but I hope there's going to be a price to pay, because if there isn't, our country is in trouble. If this is allowed to go unchecked, my goodness, where do we go next?
Well, there must be a reason, Joan. I think it gives us all hope that maybe this is it. The issue with SCOTUS picking up this issue on president immunity, the Jake Lang case, and I know that he had been moving this up, and they've been keeping him on ice. And I asked him, I said, Jake, why? He goes, well, because I won't surrender. I won't tell them that Donald Trump is wrong, and disclaim any kind of loyalty to MAGA. And because I won't. And I said, well, how do you know that? He says, well, I can tell you, every one of the J6 prisoners who have been processed out with minimal amounts of sentences have disclaimed any loyalty to Donald Trump or MAGA.
Yeah.
So that's the get out of jail card.
You know what? I bet they're really regretting now that they didn't give this fellow, and I know there's a couple others like Joseph Fisher, and they didn't just let him go, because now it's going to the court. These guys fought, they're heroes. And one day they're going to have a building named after these guys if they win this Supreme Court case, because that's going to lead to the release of hundreds of people who were simply charged with obstructing an official proceeding because they were there for the most part.
And hopefully a reduction in any kind of sentencing. Maybe even I have to believe if Donald Trump is elected, that he would exonerate, he would pardon each one of these individuals, except in the case where there was. And that's what I asked Jake flat out. I go, Jake, why? What did you do? You know, did you? I mean, you know, for them to target you to this degree, you must have done something. And but he, you know, he did say that he helped Roseanne Boylan. If you remember, she was one that was crushed in the in the channel there, right? And he was with her, you know, trying to help her and save her. But where he was at was in the heat of where, you know, where all these people were being corralled in that tunnel, and you had a lot of the problems in that area. So he was pointed out. So I don't know if he did something to defend himself. I mean, the use of force that is well documented, which was extraordinary, extreme, and uncalled for, and out of protocol. I mean, there was no. I mean, it's interesting, Joe, because we have a situation where, you know, with Derek Chauvin in his case, right? The police chief is saying, "Hey, we never trained that form of use, you know, with a prisoner." And he flat out lied, because they showed later documentation which they wouldn't allow in court, right?
Oh, really?
And
I didn't even know that. Wow.
Oh yeah, there's documentation of how they trained to do this, and what they did. Again, by optics, they presented a story that Derek Chauvin had his knee on the throat of George Floyd. It wasn't. When you look at the different angles, it was on his back, just the way they're trained to do this. And this is a 20-year veteran in the force. And so he was made to be a scapegoat because leadership did not have the courage to be able to talk this down, to bring the mob under control. But mob ruled, and the mob forced the city, and they acquiesced and folded and paid George Floyd's family $27 million. When the toxicology came out post that said that he actually died of a fentanyl over. He had 4 times the normal, you know, death level for most people who die of fentanyl. He had 4 times that level in his body.
I wonder when Chauvin gets an appeal. Is he appealing? I would hope.
Yeah,
so.
he appealed. They denied it. He's the scapegoat. So they're gonna hold on. They're gonna hold him down there for, you know, for a while until, you know, there's got to be. I mean, because here's the mayor, and the mayor flat out lied. He gets reelected. So it really says something about, you know, about the people there, that they would reelect somebody who has lied to them.
Yeah. Well, by the way, just to back up, because, you know, a lot of people will misconstrue what we say about the January 6th. It's already against the law to punch a policeman or to hit him with a flagpole. So nobody's saying anything about that. But you don't have to tack on these extra charges about obstructing a proceeding when that's what all protesters try to do. Mostly on the left. That's the whole idea, that they're trying to get people's attention. They're trying to. I mean, how many people try to talk and the left will make noise so they can't proceed and they have to give up? I mean, is that going to be obstruction too now? So we're not saying that the violence is acceptable, but don't tack on made up stuff that came from the Enron case that has no bearing on this case.
Oh, exactly. Well, and look what happened. What was it? 6 months before, when you had Black Lives Matter and Antifa attacking, you know, the D.C. and the Capitol building. They had to put President Trump under wraps, move him into a secure spot, and all the damage. In fact, more police officers, of course, it was easy because no police officers died during January 6th, but there were more police officers that were injured during that event. It wasn't even close.
I've seen estimates of 100 to 180, depending on who's talking about it.
Exactly. And guess what, Joe? Nobody went to jail.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. They set fire to the church, a historic church next to it. They got over the first they have the very high fence, but then they also had bicycle racks, just like at January 6th. And they walked right over those, pushed everybody away. They threw rocks at the police. That's how they hurt them. They were there not just 3 hours, 3 days, 3 days of doing this. Talk about obstructing an official proceeding. How about the presidency? Doesn't he count as a part of the government? So, this was all, it's almost sad when we talk about it in a way.
Well, but you see, this is the deal. Like any infection, Joe, we got to lance it. Yeah. We got to open the wound all the way up. We got to clean it up. We've got to put antiseptic, antibiotics over all this, these wounds to where we can really address this. But when you have one party, you talk about obstruction and conspiracy. This is being led by the Democratic Party, this obstruction and conspiracy to promote evil and to destroy our way of life. And they have been very successful up to this point. Yeah. Now, our hope and belief is always that in the end, the truth will win. By God's grace and mercy, Joe, maybe we have that opportunity. Yeah. Maybe we have that opportunity where, truth can come out finally, and we're able to pull, not only because I believe that all these threads kind of intersect, whether we're talking January 6th, whether we're talking about all these other things that are going on, the election fraud that's happened, there's got to be some central entity that's controlling this, or, like you and I talked about, how do you get 6, 7 swing states to shut down all at the same time for 3 hours, stop the count in order to manufacture a result that's satisfactory for them? How does one, that is a coordinated and orchestrated event. Yeah. That wasn't just coincidental that you had. I mean, if you had one or two, you might say, okay, a little bit of, but you got 5, 6, 7 all shutting down at the same time.
Well, Bill, the encouraging thing is that we were talking about that Heartland Institute survey. It shows people do get it. They really get it. And that's a great encouragement to me and to a lot of people.
Well, I see, again, goes to our point, Joe. The truth is coming out, and Joe's referring to this new report that came out, I believe it was just yesterday, from Heartland Institute and Rasmussen. And it says 17% of mail-in voters admit, look at this, listen to this number, 17% admit that in 2020 they voted in a state where they are no longer a permanent resident. Yeah. Okay, that's number one. Number two, 21% of mail-in voters admitted that they filled out a ballot for a friend or family member. Wow. Okay, against the law. 17% of mail-in voters said they signed a ballot for a friend or family member with or without his permission.
Without.
Also illegal. 8% of likely voters say they were offered pay or a reward for voting in 2020. Yeah. Also illegal.
There's so much, Bill, and I think that 8% might be the one that concerns me the most. I wish they broke that down to see how much came from some of these nonprofit organizations. Mm-hmm. That would support what True the Vote was saying about harvesting. Mm-hmm. They were saying people were getting paid $10 a ballot, sometimes much more than $10 a ballot. I would love to, because 8% is a whopping big number, and an election decided by 1% or less.
Right.
So that's a huge number. And I wish I hope they follow up with some more questions like this. This was a very respectable survey, by the way. I said to, I've told you I'm doing some work on the January 6th case and the election stuff. And I said to people when we heard this yesterday, I said, well, let me check out this stuff because I want to make sure this is a legit survey. It is legit. They did a good job. They got they used Rasmussen to do the survey. I have a lot of respect for them. They have a good margin of error, and the confidence rate are acceptable. It's over 1,000 people, 1,085 people surveyed. Yeah. So this is a significant, and the questions are right out there, so you can see how they worded it. Some of these surveys don't tell you how they word the questions. This one is telling you this is what we asked them.
Exactly. And you're talking what, a plus or minus error factor of about 3% out of this, right?
Yeah. I think it's 3%, 95%. So what that means is they're saying we are 95% certain that the error rate will fall somewhere between 3 and minus or 3 plus. Exactly. And that's a very respectable percentage.
Yeah, by today's standards, without a doubt. The bottom line in summary of this from Rasmussen was taken together. The results of these survey questions, Joe, appear to show that voter fraud was widespread.
Yeah.
Voter fraud was widespread in the 2020 election, especially among those who cast in mail-in ballots. And you and I have talked about this before. The history is clear. We've had governmental studies on this previously, that mail-in ballots was an invitation for voter fraud.
Yep. Trump said it first, and actually Jimmy Carter said it first.
Jimmy Carter, exactly.
And then Trump brought it up. And of course, when Trump said it, then everybody was dismissive because it's Donald Trump, and that's what they do.
So here it is. Donald Trump's the bad guy. He warns you this is going to happen. And in the words of Barack Obama, elections have consequences. Well, how do you like what you elected now?
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump, he's been right about so many things. It's ridiculous now. He was right about the border. He was right about Ukraine. When he was impeached for that, he was trying to warn America. We got a corrupt relationship going between a family member of Biden and the vice president at the time when it happened. Right. And this should be investigated. All he was asking for is check it out. He said, and he didn't even say, talk to me. He said, just call our FBI and tell them what you know if you know anything. And
our FBI should have known, and they did know. They had to know, Joe, because this stuff had been going on during the Obama years. And my question still remains is that here you've got Joe Biden compromised. You got John Kerry compromised. You've got Joe Biden compromised. And this happens when Barack Obama's president. So you're going to tell me the big guy is not getting his beak wet? But nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, you know what they're saying now, that he's going to bail out in May. I don't know I think he's got to bail out. Joe Biden cannot withstand what's about to happen with this impeachment. He's going down. So he's going to bail out. He won't actually leave. He's just going to announce that he's leaving at the end of his term. And then they expect, of course, pretty boy from California to come in.
Newsom. Yeah, they're going to be in a mad scramble because let me tell you, there's a divide there. Whether it's Governor Newsom or, a Hail Mary pass of Michelle Obama.
Or Kamala Harris, because she's a street fighter. And I don't think, even though everybody thinks she's lousy, I don't think she thinks she's lousy. I think she's a street fighter who will say, hey, you can't push me out. I'm in line. So I think there's going to be some real fighting going on.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what she can do. She wasn't very effective during the presidential campaign. As you recall, she lost her own state, did basically about the same level she's done consistently, about 3% when it came to polling. And now we've had, over 3 years of experience with her leadership or lack thereof. And she's unimpressive. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to take in the absence of money and candidate, I mean, in the absence of a message or a quality candidate, you need a lot of money, and I think you need a lot more money to and a lot more cheating if you think that Kamala Harris is going to win the Oval Office.
Well, I don't think she'll succeed. I'm just saying there's going to be some real animosity, and they're going to be having a food fight.
Yeah,
she's not going to go down quietly, in my opinion. She's going to fight.
Well, I would agree with you. I've been saying, and in fact, I said this going into the 2020 election because of the signs that you'd look at the Democratic Party. I underestimated their level of cheating, but I had I truly believed in all my heart that the Democrats were going to lose so severely that it was going to cause a civil war within the Democratic Party, and that it was going to take them at least a decade to reconnoiter and rebuild themselves. Because all this massive fraud, all this, the poor policy, the alignment with Marxism that they have embraced within their party, it's just unsustainable. And it really is. It's at the end of the day, it's a small minority, and you've already got Democrats that are jumping ship because it's just untenable. Yeah. And, and on the other hand, I will say this, Joe, for the record, the Republicans have a grand opportunity here. And I don't know right now, without Donald Trump, I don't see the leadership that can coalesce these factions in such a way to bring them together, to unite, to offer a true alternative and an open door to a Republican tent that will embrace a broader constituency. I think the opportunity is there, but it's up to them to, get their messaging squared away and, make some right decisions.
Yeah, I heard a very good, I can't remember the guy's name, but a very good analysis. And he was saying that actually, he's one of the guys that says, well, Joe Biden announces he's done in May. Mm-hmm. He will keep running, being president after that. But he said that Newsom is not going to beat Trump. He said he would normally, but he said he can't beat Trump because of these third party guys coming in. He's got Manson, who's doing a 2-month listening tour. We all know what that means. I mean, that means you're running. Yes. Who else do you have? You've got, you got a couple more who are
you got RFK. RFK is and they're even talking, but Nikki Haley's not going to go to no labels. I don't see her jumping ship. But there's all kinds of theories. But you're right. I think that this could be an interesting time. And for me, I've kind of been waiting for these two parties being broken up because if you remember, it was John Naismith in his book Megatrends, probably 25 years ago, said that the two-party system was like two dinosaurs mating, that the two-party system was no longer tenable, but it's been able to hang in this long. So I think it's still a matter of time before his prediction is fulfilled. And we might be close to that.
Well, this guy said that there's only 2 times in the last 120 years that a third party did pretty well. And one, of course, was Ross Perot, 19%. Right. And then he had to go all the way back to the Bull Moose Party with Teddy Roosevelt. We got about 19%. He said, and those, in both cases, they sank the party they were aligned with because of taking all those votes away. He says that RFK right now has 15% in all the polling. If he runs, and then you've got the Green Party. You still have Jill Stein. She might take 1%. You've got, like I say, Manson may jump in there. That's their headache. That's their headache. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't think that, who is it? Cornell, the professor. Cornell West. I don't think he's probably much more than maybe a 1% type of guy, but it's all, it all chips away. And in the midst of, an impeachment inquiry that's going to be underway, and what they've done to Donald Trump, clearly, I mean, the polling numbers are dramatically showing that the people are beginning to see what's happening with our government, and they see that what they're doing to Donald Trump is unjust and unfair. And
Yeah.
and that strikes such a basic human chord, Joe, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the thing that gets me, Bill, this guy who is so smart, who's such a good candidate, though, I mean, a good pundit,
Mhm.
he left one element out that worries me. He said, well, Trump's going to win. He'll get like 1 or 2% more. What about the cheating factor? Do you think
Exactly.
the Democrats aren't going to cheat again?
Oh, exactly. Hey,
Remember Fetterman? He wins. That guy, he wins by 4.5%. He
right.
was and Kerry Lake was up 2.7% the day before. All the way, by the way, for weeks she was gaining, always ahead. Got all the way to 2.7%, and she loses by 2.3%. She lost by 0.7, a
Yeah.
swing of 3% on the last day.
Right. Exactly.
That's the mail-in ballot.
Yeah, exactly. So the Democratic Party is the party of stolen elections.
Yeah.
They have developed it into an art form.
They're good
They're
at it.
hoping and praying for another COVID-like outbreak to where they can go again. Elias and his 500 Democratic attorneys will storm the state houses of these swing states and get them to violate their own state laws and once again open us up to voter fraud. Because meanwhile, as you and I have discussed before, people like yourself but still few in number have done a deeper dive. You look at the numbers. You have seen how voter fraud can take place in your new book, How Elections Are Stolen. Here's 23 ways. I mean, this is a combination of your study that you've done, but also of what empirically what has happened in the past, how elections have been stolen, right?
Yeah. Well, I probably should say 24 ways now because I keep finding new ways. I want to get into that, but one of the things, I just published a little article on American Thinker on non-citizen votes. I think it went to American Thinker. I can't remember where I put it. But anyway, I'm going to look at my notes here.
Okay.
Back in 2018, Stacey Abrams said she was going to ride a blue wave, and it was going to be documented people and the undocumented. She was openly saying, I'm going to rely on illegal non-citizens.
Right.
That's what my piece was on. How important is the non-citizen vote? Now, remember, non-citizen is not just the illegals running over the border.
Right.
I know a guy I was talking to not too long ago. We were in a bar actually, and he said, "Oh, I'm not a citizen." I said, well, "When did you come here?" He said, "1954."
Wow.
He said, "I just didn't." I said, "Why didn't you become a citizen?" He said, "Well, I didn't see the reason to it. What would it give me? Just a vote, and I didn't care."
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people. He's legal, but he's not a citizen, and he's not allowed to vote. But we don't know what percentage that is. Well, anyway, here's an interesting thing. Everybody says there's no, illegals don't vote and all that. In Texas, a few years ago, about 2 years ago, they started to get serious about it. And the Secretary of State found that there were 95,000 people who were both on the voter rolls and the non-citizen rolls, listings.
Right.
Now, they weren't saying that 95,000 was deadly accurate because they know that some of those people may have naturalized. They may have gone through the ceremony. They came over illegally. They were illegal. But by the time they started voting, they became naturalized citizens.
Right.
58,000 of them were voting. So there's 95,000 registrants that were looked bad. Now, of course, the Democrats went absolutely insane over this. They filed multiple lawsuits, and within a very short period of a few weeks, a judge shut the whole thing down, said, you can't do this, it's intimidating people. Of course, everything's intimidating.
Right.
But anyway, they had to revise their system to become almost a joke because the new system said that basically, if you find people who appear to be, who are non-citizens, you can't do anything with that unless they voluntarily say, I voted as a non-citizen. So in other words, they have to confess to a felony before you can even think about it.
Like that's going to happen.
But they still got 12,000, almost 12,000 people that way.
Wow.
I mean, it shows you how big this problem is.
Exactly.
And then there's another one, Georgia, which I wasn't aware of, should have been. This is kind of recent. This is not just non-citizens. It's all sorts of problems. In 2001, Georgia passed a law that said that any individual citizen can file a complaint against somebody regarding an election matter if they think they're doing something wrong.
Right.
They got 80,000 complaints, and they already, according to CBS, that wrote a hit piece on it. CBS hated the whole idea.
Right.
But they already got 12,000 were upheld. These were, in other words, bogus voters, and they've already verified that 12,000 were upheld. I mean, that's an election. I mean, that's more than the margin in Georgia that Biden had.
Exactly.
I don't want to, I'm probably rambling too long, but Nevada, you've got at least huge thousands of people. I could give you the number in Wisconsin.
Yeah, go ahead and do this, Joe. This is important. Again, see, we have to balance out the deception with truth. And you've been studying this, and you've got the numbers, because the Democrats insist that you have no proof. There's no there. And but there is. Go ahead.
Right. In Nevada, it's over 5,000 that in the 2020 election. Now, the Secretary of State acknowledged that. But she said, and this is correct, she said, but some of those may have naturalized in those 5 years. That's true. But on the other hand, she only did a 5-year look back. What she did was she went 5 years back into the Department of Motor Vehicles logs.
Yes.
And these are people who, to get a driver's license, they had to show who they were. And so they presented their immigration papers to the Department of Motor Vehicles. So they're voting, but they're immigrants, and they're showing that. Now, like I say, some of those, maybe that 5,000 dropped to 3,000. But on the other hand, if you had done a 15-year look back or a 30-year look back, because as I say, there are people who have been here for decades as non-citizens.
Exactly.
How much more would it be? And by the way, nobody was required to present immigration papers. Not everybody verifies their identity by calling up their old immigration papers. So God knows how big it is in Nevada. In Wisconsin, I can't even give you the answer, because you know what Wisconsin did before the election? Even though it's a federal law, you can't have on the voter rolls known non-citizens. If you know this guy's a non-citizen, you take him off the registration so he can't just vote. They ignored that. Everybody was on. No way at this point, no easy way anyway, of figuring out how many non-citizens voted. So we don't know.
Yeah.
Now, Bill, here's a really big number. The Public Information, Legal Fund, the Public Information Legal Foundation.
Okay.
They call themselves PILF, P-I-L-F. They did a lengthy study that just concluded fairly recently. It's nationwide, and they found over 349, I think it's 349,000 dead people on the rolls. Now, I'm not saying they voted. They said thousands of them did vote.
In Illinois, they vote.
Right.
It's anecdotal. They always say the polls never close until they get the cemetery count.
Well, those must be very healthy people. They are so healthy that even after they die, they can vote.
Well, the other thing that happens too that's miraculous is they will die as a Republican and come back and vote as a Democrat.
I never heard that one, but I believe it. They also found about 40,000, 43,000 in 1 year duplicates where they voted twice. Now, this is nationwide, okay? But still, those are huge numbers. Let me see. I have one more here for you. Arizona.
Okay, we've only got about a minute left, Joe. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, Arizona. This is in a way the most damning of all. They have something called the federal only voter. Yes. Because Arizona insists that you present citizen papers if you want to vote, and the federal government says you can't insist. So they say you have to use a separate form for the federal. The separate form has jumped from 11,900 in 18 to 36,520 to 43,222. It'll probably be 50 or 60,000 for the next election. Those are people who are almost all non-citizens in Arizona.
There you go.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what's happening. And this is what's happening to our democracy. And it's all being compromised at the hands, I'd say for the most part, Democratic Party. I know some people always like to say, well, it's the uniparty, or, it happens on both sides, regardless. But clearly the Democratic Party is leading the charge in voter fraud. They're stealing elections, and they are putting in place those who they select, not what we, the people, select. Joe Fried has been with us, the author of Debunked, also his new book, How Elections Are Stolen. Here are 23 ways recommended. And of course, now he says now it's got to be 24 ways. And
it's growing. It's growing.
I'm sure the next time we talk, we'll probably be close up to 30 because,
right.
they just keep on working, and we just keep on discovering the new ways that they're cheating. Joe Fried, cannot thank you enough. Look forward to having you back soon, and very soon, my friend. You take care.
Thank you, Bill. It's always wonderful with you. Thanks.
You got it. Our gratitude to Joe Fried and all his great work and what he's doing on behalf of freedom and liberty for we, the people. And thank you so much for being with us and sharing a part of your day. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you peace. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless. Take care.